Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the weekly Mailbox. If you're new around here, and plenty of you are, this week almost 1,000 of you have joined the army. So first of all, welcome from me. But the weekly Mailbox, what it is, it's pretty straightforward. It's your chance to ask me any questions you like, really, whether it's Formula 1, Formula E, motorsports, or frankly, anything. I don't really care at this point. Just send in your questions and we answer 5 questions. And the very final question, we open to the floor. We let you guys decide, and definitely question 5 this week is a spicy one. So I'm looking forward to that at the end of the video. But first question comes from Thomas. Do you think Sainz should have stayed with Red Bull, or is he better at McLaren? Really nice question. We've been talking about this ever since Gasly was first signed. And when I was doing my research, I said that in air quotation marks, my research for these Mailbox videos, I like to do these a little bit more chilled for new viewers. I was looking back at some of my old content, and at the time, last season, when I was predicting who was going to be in Red Bull this season, I was convinced it would be Carlos Sainz. I really was. I thought there's no way they're going to rush Gasly into that Red Bull seat. Surely they're going to take Carlos Sainz, who had proved his experience, but proved that he can be consistent, he doesn't make mistakes too often, and he's a solid midfield driver, and I think could make the step up to Red Bull. The team instead went with Gasly, and, well, we've seen the aftermath, the fireworks that has caused for Red Bull. So I think in their camp, they really are going to regret the decision they didn't bring in Sainz. For Sainz, I actually think it's good for him. Similarly to the fact I think it's good for Ricciardo that he has left Red Bull. It seems to be a really toxic environment, that team at the moment, and I really question the use of their B team, Toro Rosso, and the mental effect that's having on their drivers. So for a guy like Sainz, who was tied down to a Red Bull contract, even when he was at Renault, was still in the Red Bull family, to be able to escape that and to have the freedom that he's shown this season in McLaren, he seems like a brand new driver. He really does. Boss in the midfield this year, number one driver at a team he seems to enjoy racing for, replacing Fernando Alonso, and to have a teammate like Lando Norris, it seems perfect for him. So no, I don't think Sainz regrets the move to McLaren, but I think Red Bull would love to have him back in the team. Question 2 from GLEN Robertson. What teams can you see joining or leaving Formula 1 in the next 5 years? And with Mercedes dominance and more manufacturer interest in Formula E, what is there to attract teams to Formula 1 right now? Deep question, this one. Love this one as well. I think we'll start with part 2. For this question, because you're right, Glenn. What is there to attract teams to Formula 1? Because at the moment, they are going to Formula E. There's a question a little bit later on, spoilers, about Porsche next season in Formula E. Porsche are a huge brand. They're a huge brand, so much so, they've been linked to Formula 1 for years. They've made the decision to go to Formula E. Jaguar, Audi have all made the decision to go to Formula E. Even Mercedes is taking the plunge next season. What's to attract Formula 1? Well, teams to Formula 1? Well, the stupid answer it's going to sound, but is the fact that it's Formula 1. That's the reason. It's pure. It's the pinnacle of motor racing. And I don't think Formula E will ever be able to compete with that, because Formula E does not have the history. Formula E at the moment does not have the calibre of driver. And that is what Formula 1 can offer. One of the best, I was going to say advertising and branding, but one of the best publicity things you can do for a company is go to Formula 1. Formula E, okay, if you want to show the world that you're improving in sustainable electric technologies, fair play. But to prove yourself that you're one of the greatest manufacturers in the world, Formula 1 is the place to go. Hence Renault going out of Formula E to Formula 1. To answer your question, what teams are going to join and leave, that is so up in the air. And I think, to be honest with you, you're going to see more teams like Haas joining Formula 1, pure racing teams rather than manufacturers, to be honest with you. And leaving, I don't really see any teams leaving. Maybe Toro Rosso could swap out with a Honda, something like that, but Definitely in the next 5 years, I don't see it. But in 2010, we had 4 teams join out of the blue, so you really don't know. But at the moment, I think we'll keep the same teams for a little bit of time. Brendan asks the next question. Chase Carey shared his goal of making Formula One a global pay-per-view product. With declining views as of late, would this decision hurt Formula One in the long term? Let's be boring. The answer to this is yes. It would definitely hurt Formula One in the long term, in my opinion. Because pay-per-view, if you don't know, pretty straightforward. I believe it's what sports such as MMA, boxing, can't think of any others, but it's basically where you pay to watch. So a lot of football these days is covered behind a paywall. And Formula One over the last season or 2, I believe now, I think they introduced it at the beginning of last season, has launched Formula One TV, and in the UK, we currently can't use the full version of that. We can use the Formula One TV archive, but not to watch live races. I believe in the US, you also don't have that, but I think across Europe and South America, you do have F1 TV, and that's the only way you can watch Formula One. In the UK this year, this is probably going to be the best way I'm going to be able to explain this, but I'd love to know if you're elsewhere in the world what your situation is. But in the UK, I've always been someone who's always watched Channel 4, always watched BBC. This is the first year I've had to swap to Sky, because only the British Grand Prix this year was being shown on free to view. I think that's wrong. Personally, I think that's been a big thing that's hurt football over the past few years. I think Formula One, they're trying to aim it at a younger demographic. And to get new fans, no one's going to take the plunge of a £20 a month Sky bill, now TV bill, for a sport they've never watched before. Yes, YouTube's brilliant, and they're pushing that more and more, but it's still not as good as Formula E. And Formula One's big rival, again, in quotation marks, free to view on YouTube, on Facebook, BBC iPlayer, it's there to watch, it's available. And that's what Formula One, to me, has to do. That has to be a priority. I'm going to do a big video on that because it's a huge topic we need to talk about, but just in note form, that's my thoughts. It would really hurt Formula One in the long term. Joshua asks question 4. It's our first real Formula E question of the day. Where do you think Porsche and or Lotterer will finish next season? Good question. Difficult to answer. That being said, I think the best way to judge this question is on the performances of HWA last year. If you're not a big fan of Formula E, or if you just watch it here and there, Porsche joining Formula E next year. Mercedes are also joining Formula E, but they also had a team called HWA Race Lab race as Mercedes this season. It's just the same team, and they're going to be swapping name for next year, so it doesn't hurt the brand, but it gives Mercedes a stepping stone. So I think Porsche, I don't think they'll be winning titles. I don't think, to be honest with you, they'll be winning races or even podiums. HWA did get a podium last season. Stoffel Van Dorn in Rome, the race I was at. Awesome to see, by the way. I don't think Porsche are going to be particularly strong next year. I'm not completely inspired by their driver lineup. I like Andre Lotterer. He was one of, for me, the more consistent drivers over last year. But Neil Yanni, in the couple of races he did a couple of seasons ago now for Dragon, I wasn't impressed. And I think they're going to struggle. I really do. I think they'll be further back than HWA have been this year, which if you follow Formula E, you might be a little bit worried about, but I think with all these kinds of series, you've got to give teams a couple of years to develop. You always have to. Look at Mercedes in Formula One. It took them 3 full years to really get that car and fighting up at the front, and look at where they are now. So give them time, but I don't think it's going to be a brilliant season or a title challenge next year. And the final question, which if you've read it already, you're going to wonder why I've called this the audience question and leaving it open to the floor. But Crystally Animations, I think it's how you say it. Apologies from me. If Grosjean leaves, hopefully that's not for a long time, who will you support from then on? Good question. Hard to answer question. But the honest truth, to be honest with you, I don't really know. I don't really know, because Romain Grosjean is a driver that I've supported since I was well, since he came into Formula 1 back in 2012. Always loved Grosjean. And before I even became a voice in the Formula 1 community, he was my guy. And I do feel sometimes that it's unfair for me to have a favourite driver, although I always try to stay as unbiased as possible. And it's great that Grosjean's not at the front, or else that would really cause some upsets. That being said, I've been a fan of Kimi Räikkönen in the past, but for me, I'm usually quite a loyal guy with these kind of things. I was a big fan of Robert Kubica back in the day, and that's how I ended up supporting Grosjean, was I was a fan of Kubica. He then obviously left. I stayed with the team. Grosjean came in. Then Lotus left, and I followed Grosjean to Haas. So most likely it'll be whoever fills in at Haas, whether that's Hülkenberg, maybe Wehrlein, Bottas. That's probably what I'll do. That being said, I'm not the biggest fan of Kevin Magnussen, but I think I'll probably have a season or two where I'm just sussing out the grid. I was a fan of Carlos Sainz when he was at Toro Rosso a few years ago, and I think that's the driver I mentioned who I supported at the very start of this channel. But what I want to ask you guys isn't who I should support. Who do you support? I'm really interested to see. I'm interested to see how many people are in the Orange Army, Team LH. How many Ferrari fans do we have out there? This is something I haven't really asked before, but I'm curious. So please feel free to put it in the comments section below. Of course, your questions are very welcome for next week's episode. Formula 1 is almost back, so next week we can try and do a Belgium special. Maybe we'll have a little look into that, but of course, ask whatever you want. It's always appreciated. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Subscribe if you are new, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.